right, so today we're going to start with at the very beginning. Bio 102 is all about looking at changes in form. It's all about form-determining function and how we get those forms, how we go from one type of organism to another type of organism. So we're going to start off talking about population genetics, looking at evolutionary theory, basic evolutionary theory, and then modern evolutionary theory. And then we're going to move into sort of look at the diversity of life, look at all of life that's out there. Some possible proposals on the beginning of life, moving from there into looking at organisms and organ systems, and then finishing out the semester talking about ecology, which is really just follow the bouncing electron. How can you pass energy through a system? So we begin sort of at the beginning. We're going to start talking about descent with modification. This is a historical perspective on evolutionary biology. I do want to be very explicitly clear. This lecture, what I'm about to tell you, is not the current theory of evolution. This is not the one that we've worked on for the past 200 years. This is where it started at. This is the baseline level, and then for 200 years we've improved on it to get where we are now. There are flaws in it. There are a lot of flaws in the original evolutionary proposals. We've been working on those flaws. So yes, I know that there are flaws in this, but we're going to, after we discuss this, start talking about modern evolutionary biology, using some mathematical equations, and then showing how really what look like flaws in these historical perspectives, those holes have been filled. So we're going to begin with evolutionary thought. So in the ages, Charles Darwin was not the first person to propose evolutionary thought. He was not the first person to try classifying things, or the first person to try to look at relationships between different organisms. In fact, you get to go back to ancient Greece, because really, that's where science began. Not really. Science began when the first person took a rock and banged it against another rock to get fire. Because really, you do that once, and you're like, ooh, a spark. You do it several times, you get fire. Scientific method. We got this. Ancient Greece, though, that's where we ascribe a lot of our ancient history to. If you look at the Persians, though, they were really, really advanced then as a culture in science, but they just don't get enough credit. Really, this is the history of Western thought. Sorry, diverging. This guy here is Aristotle. Aristotle thought that all life was fixed and unchanging. Life does not change at all. He arranged all of life in what's called the Scala Naturae, which I think is hilarious because he created the Scala Naturae, which is Latin, but he was Greek, so it's not really what he named it. We're going to start off at the very bottom and work our way to the top. At the bottom of the scale, the very bottom, rocks, slugs, plants. Actually, slugs are higher than plants because slugs ate plants. So rocks, then plants, then animals, and at the very, very, very top were humans. Everything was arranged in a very linear line. Each form of life was perfect. Now this was something he picked up from his teacher Plato with the Platonic forms, but we'll discuss that later. If you look at contemporary writing of the time, the Old Testament, each organism was designed by God and was perfect. Same with Aristotle's view. It matched the evidence that people saw because organisms were designed to fit their environment. There was an intelligent designer, and that made them perfectly adapted to their environment. Now this view lasted for thousands of years. In fact, Linnaeus is one of the first scientists whose whole experiences was classification. He wanted to go about and name all the organisms. He wanted to go about and classify them, put them together. He created this idea of binomial nomenclature. Binomial. Bi means two, nomial means name. Two names. Every organism would have two names. A general name and a specific name, otherwise known as the genus and the species. And the reason he did that was for the greater glory of God. His big contribution. Oh, by the way, sidebar. I'm not going to sit there in tests and ask you historical questions. Did Linnaeus do this? Did Lamarck do that? I'm not interested in random trivia like that. I'm just giving you the historical perspective in order to sort of give you a background. It's the whole idea of learning for the sake of learning. So Linnaeus created this nested scale. So instead of it being this linear scale that Aristotle had, he started to sort of put things together in groups, just like you would do. If I was to take lab activity, and I forgot the Skittles, sorry. If I was to take Skittles, a bag of Skittles, Reese Pieces, and M&Ms. And by the way, that's the greatest joke to ever play on somebody. Combine a bunch of Skittles, Reese Pieces, and M&Ms and offer them one, and they won't know what they're eating. If you were to take that, the first thing you're going to want to do is separate it out into the brand of candy. This pile is Skittles, this pile is M&Ms, this pile is Reese Pieces. And then from there, you can continue to nest. The Skittles then can be put into different colors. The Reese Pieces into different colors. The M&Ms into different colors. Heck, if you had M&Ms, some were peanut and some are chocolate or some were caramel or whatever they have now, Rice Krispie, I don't know. You could then subdivide them out. They're nesting inside of each other. Candy's the big concept. Then you've got the 3 types of candy, and then you've got the different colors inside. That's a nested scale. That's what Linnaeus really contributed. The other thing Linnaeus did was really, really novel at the time. He didn't exclude humans from his classification. He said, you know what? Humans are really like those monkeys over there. We look a lot alike. So he put us all together. He put humans into a group with lemurs and simians. He said, this is a group. He did, though, still say humans are the most important, because if you didn't say that, people will kill you. He said humans are the most important, but look, we're kind of like these other guys. So we, for the first time, got nested in with the animals. So before it was always minerals, plants, animals, then humans. Now it's minerals, plants, animals, and the animals include humans. All right, so we haven't gotten to Charles Darwin yet. We want to talk about this other guy first, the guy named Lamarck. Lamarck put forth a theory of descent with modification. I know, this sounds a lot like Darwin. Every organism passes down some characteristic to its offspring that make that offspring better. So he said that you could, traits that are acquired during life can be passed down to your offspring. If you work out and get really strong, your offspring will be really strong. And if they are automatically strong, then they're going to work out more, they're going to get stronger, and get even stronger offspring until you have super babies who can lift large things. So that was Lamarck's idea. And he was, to show this, he pointed out the giraffe. Now, okay, if you guys ever go to a zoo or randomly see a giraffe around, I don't know why you'd see a giraffe around without a zoo, but you know, you might. They are the weirdest looking organisms out there. One thing that always drives me nuts about giraffes is they got horns. And you don't think about giraffes with horns, but they do. They got these 2 little stubby horns at the top. You're like, what are those horns good for? Giraffes are most famous for their very long necks, and they use their necks for all sorts of things. Obviously, people know that they use their necks to get food from trees, right? But they also use their necks to fight. Males will fight each other using their necks and just like start slapping necks together. It's called necking. Now, in that capacity, you can see there's a different vocabulary for giraffes than humans. We don't fight with our necks. It'd be hilarious, but we don't. Lamarck proposed that you started off. I love this picture. This one on the far left over here, stubby-necked giraffe. It still has its super long legs, stubby little neck. And what Lamarck said was, as that giraffe stretched its neck out to get the leaves, its neck slowly grew a little bit bigger, and then it passed that on to its offspring. And then that one, it has a slightly longer neck, it stretched even higher. And every time it's stretching, it's acquiring this longer neck. And that could then be passed down to its offspring. Lamarck's giraffes are super fun. I swear, as far as, I don't even know how did they draw this? Did they just like Photoshop and squish? I mean, it's fun. So that was when Darwin was born. So this idea is around for about 30 years, because Darwin did a lot of his stuff in his early 30s. He actually rejected the idea that acquired traits are passed on. It's not the acquired traits. He thought there was something else. But he did agree, and Lamarck really contributed this idea, variation is important. Some things can survive better because they have better traits. So Darwin wasn't sold on acquired traits being passed down, but he was absolutely sold on the idea that you have to have variation in a population. So as that ties to modern molecular genetics, which you guys learned, I hope, last semester, we understand some of those basic mechanisms for passing on traits. What are the basic mechanisms for passing on traits? Courtney. Basic mechanism. How would you pass down a trait? Reproduction. Okay, cool. And when you're reproducing, so I'm going to get really specific here. Remember the birds and the bees talk, guys? When you're reproducing, you're going to have what two types of cells coming together? Those are chromosomes, but you're getting where I'm going. Yes? Yes, eggs and sperm, says the person in class who understands how reproduction works. So, eggs and sperm. Eggs and sperm are what kind of cells? Sex cells, otherwise known as gametes. And gametes are different than somatic cells or body cells because of what? What? Oh, you guys got this. You got body cells, all the rest of your cells in your body, and you got these sex cells. What's the difference between the two? Big difference, huge difference. Big difference between mitosis and meiosis. They get half the amount of chromosomes. And what's that word? The word you're used to describe half the amount of chromosomes. Haploid. So these gametes are haploid. That means they contain half the chromosome complement. They're going to be able to transmit a chromosome from the mom and a chromosome from the dad. They fuse to form a diploid zygote. So now we're getting not only variation, we're also getting a mechanism for heredity. So this is where Darwin didn't know all that. He kind of just knew there was something out there that was allowing traits to be passed from parent to offspring, but he didn't know what. Luckily, we do know what it is now.